This primitive creature managed to hack our quantum-encrypted communications network, using nothing but a modified entertainment console and some caffeine drink called Mountain Dew? High Commander Zixtal's upper appendages twitched in what his species considered the equivalent of an eye roll. The movement sent ripples through his iridescent carapace as he stared through the containment field at their latest acquisition, a disheveled human female who appeared to be more interested in tapping rhythmically on her knee than acknowledging the presence of the most advanced species in the Orion arm. "Affirmative, sir," Lieutenant Carthy replied, her crystalline form shifting uncomfortably. "And she claims it was, quote, just for the lulz." The human's head snapped up at that, a grin spreading across her face. "Actually, I said it was for the memes. Get it right if you're going to quote me, Sparkles." Carthy's crystalline structure flickered in irritation at the nickname. She'd been dealing with their captive for the past 6 hours, and each minute had chipped away at her normally unflappable professional demeanor. "Sir, I must again recommend we terminate this experiment. The subject is clearly bored," the human interrupted, stretching dramatically. "Super bored. Like watching paint dry in slow motion bored. You guys have this amazing ship with tech that literally bends reality. And the most interesting thing you've done is ask me the same questions over and over while looking constipated. Well, as constipated as a bug in a crystal can look." High Commander Zixtal chittered something in his native tongue that the translation matrix politely declined to render. He'd spent the last 3 centuries leading the Confederation's most elite research vessel, cataloging and studying primitive species across the galaxy. Never in all that time had he encountered one quite as infuriating as humans. "You will address us with the respect due to a civilization that has mastered faster-than-light travel and—" "Yeah, about that," the human interrupted again, pulling what appeared to be a small metal device from her sock. Both aliens tensed, but their scans had already cleared it as harmless. "Your FTL drive? The one that uses quantum tunneling to create artificial wormholes? You're doing it wrong." Carthy's crystalline form pulsed with derision. "Impossible. Our drive design has been perfected over millennia by the greatest minds in the Confederation." The human shrugged, beginning to disassemble the small device with practiced ease. "Sure, but you're still approaching it like sophisticated spacefarers who've learned to follow all the rules. Me? I learned physics by trying to make my ancient Nintendo run Crisis. Sometimes the best solutions come from not knowing what's supposed to be impossible." Zixtal watched in fascination as she began reassembling the pieces in a completely different configuration. "And I suppose you, a member of a species that still thinks rainbow-colored sugar water is the height of refreshment, could do better? First off, don't you dare disrespect the Dew," she said, pointing the half-assembled device at him accusingly. "Second, your whole quantum tunneling approach is unnecessarily complex. You're trying to punch through space-time like it's a wall, when you could just—" She paused, clearly searching for the right words. "You know how when you're playing a video game and you find that one weird spot where the textures don't quite line up? And if you jump just right, you can clip through the map?" Both aliens stared at her blankly. "Right. Cultural reference fail. Let me put it this way. Space-time isn't as solid as you think it is. There are places where it's more like a badly knitted sweater. Pull the right thread, and you can slip right through without all the fuss of quantum tunneling." Carthy's form sparkled with what might have been laughter. "And I suppose you've tested this theory?" The human held up her now reassembled device. "Why do you think I let you catch me? I needed access to your ship's quantum processing core to finish the calculations. By the way, thanks for leaving your internal network so accessible. The firewalls were cute, like those baby gates humans use to keep toddlers from climbing the stairs." Before either alien could respond, she pressed a button on her device. A holographic display sprang to life, showing a complex series of equations that made both aliens' translation matrices spark in protest. "See, right here? This is where you're over-completing the process. You're trying to force a tunnel through the fabric of space-time using brute force quantum manipulation. But if you just—" She made a few adjustments to the equations with her fingers. "Twist it like this. You can create a temporary fold that requires about a billionth of the energy." Zixtal's antennae twitched as he studied the equations. Despite himself, he was beginning to see the elegant simplicity in her solution. But this would mean that your entire spacefaring civilization has been doing the equivalent of using a sledgehammer to push a thumbtack? She grinned. "Yep. Don't feel bad, though. Sometimes you need an outside perspective. Someone who learned physics by breaking video games and thinks energy drinks are a food group." Krathos' crystalline form had gone completely still, a sign of deep processing among her kind. The implications, if these calculations are correct. Oh, they're correct, the human said, tossing her device in the air and catching it. I double-checked them while I was upgrading your ship's systems. You're welcome, by the way. You should be seeing the effects right about. The ship's engines suddenly hummed to life, but instead of their usual deep throb, they emitted a sound more like a purring cat. The energy consumption readings on nearby displays plummeted to nearly zero. Now, Zixtel's carapace changed colors rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. You modified our engines, without authorization, while in a containment field?
The human stood up, brushing off her pants. Please, that containment field went down the moment I finished reorganizing your quantum core's processing priorities. I just stayed in here because it was funny watching you try to interrogate me while I worked. She walked through where the field should have been and patted Zixtel's carapace. No hard feelings though, right? I mean, I did just revolutionize your entire approach to space travel. Both aliens watched in stunned silence as she made her way to the door. Before leaving, she turned back with another grin. Oh, and I fixed your cafeteria synthesizers too. They now make a pretty decent approximation of Mountain Dew. You're going to need it when you start going through all the other improvements I made to your systems. Let's just say your quantum encryption isn't the only thing that needed an upgrade. The door slid shut behind her, leaving two of the Confederation's finest officers staring at each other in bewilderment. After a long moment, Krathos spoke. Sir, what do we put in our report to command? Zixtel's antennae drooped slightly. The truth, Lieutenant, that we captured what we thought was a primitive human, only to discover that their species' apparent technological limitations might be less about capability and more about style. Style, sir. Yes, Lieutenant. After all, why build a sophisticated civilization when you can apparently achieve the same results with modified entertainment devices and carbonated sugar water? He paused, his carapace shifting to a thoughtful blue. Perhaps we should request a sample of this Mountain Dew for analysis. Purely for scientific purposes, of course. Of course, sir. Krathos' crystalline form sparkled with what might have been amusement. And the human? As if in answer, every display in the room suddenly began playing something called a Rickroll at maximum volume. Lieutenant, Zixtel said with what passed for resignation among his species, I believe the human has made herself quite at home. The real question is, what do we do now that she's essentially taken over our ship? From somewhere in the ship's communication system, the human's voice chimed in. Oh, don't worry about that. I'm just gonna hang out for a while, maybe teach you guys some actual computer security, and then I'll be on my way. But first, who's up for gaming night? I found some interesting ways to modify your holographic training simulations. Both aliens looked at each other, then at the displays still playing the strange human music video, and finally at the engine readings that showed their ship was now operating at unprecedented levels of efficiency. I believe, Zixtel said carefully, that we may need to revise our definition of primitive species. And perhaps, Krathos added, performed glowing with resignation, requisition a larger supply of this Mountain Dew. The human's laughter echoed through the ship's speakers. Now you're getting it. Trust me, you haven't lived until you've played modded Minecraft on a quantum computer. Who's in?
And that was how the most advanced research vessel in the Confederation became home to weekly gaming nights, powered by quantum computers and fueled by synthesized energy drinks. The official report to command was filed under Cultural Exchange Initiative and marked Ongoing Research Required. Some say that to this day, in certain sectors of space, you can still hear the echoes of victory cries mixed with the pop of Mountain Dew cans opening, as a human teaches some of the galaxy's most sophisticated beings how to sequence break reality itself. After all, sometimes the most primitive approach is exactly what an advanced civilization needs to remember, that not all progress has to be serious. Sometimes it just has to be fun. And if anyone in the Confederation's high command questions why one of their most advanced ships now runs on what appears to be digital duct tape and caffeinated determination, well, they just haven't learned to appreciate the fine art of speedrunning the universe. 3 weeks later? No, you're still thinking too linearly, the human explained, watching as High Commander Zixtal attempted to navigate what she called a parkour course in the modified training simulator. The wall run isn't about running up the wall. It's about convincing the physics engine that gravity is more of a suggestion than a rule. The massive insectoid alien's carapace had turned a frustrated shade of mauve. That makes no logical sense. Neither does half of speedrunning, she replied, taking another sip from her synthesized Mountain Dew. The recreation wasn't perfect, but after 3 days of tweaking the molecular structure, she'd gotten it close enough. The whole point is to break the game in fun and interesting ways. Think of it like you're quantum tunneling. Except instead of following all the rules, you're looking for where the rules don't quite match up. Kurthi, who had been observing from her crystalline meditation pose, sparkled with what had become her equivalent of a chuckle. Over the past weeks, she'd developed an unexpected appreciation for human chaos theory. Like the way you rewrote our navigation systems to use what you called sequence breaking? Exactly, the human beamed. Traditional space navigation is all about plotting the most efficient course through normal space. But if you treat reality like a poorly optimized game map. She gestured at the main viewport, where the stars seemed to twist in mathematically improbable ways. You get shortcuts the developers never intended. We are not living in a simulated universe, Zixtal protested, his avatar finally giving up on the wall run and falling into the virtual abyss. Again, the human raised an eyebrow. Are you sure about that? Because I've got some interesting theories about quantum entanglement and render distance that might change your mind. Before Zixtal could respond, the ship's emergency alert system activated, or tried to. Instead of the standard klaxon, it played what the human had dubbed boss music. Incoming Confederation battlecruiser, Kurthi reported, her crystal structure pulsing with concern. They're requesting immediate docking and inspection. It seems our unusual energy signatures have attracted attention. The human cracked her knuckles, grinning. Finally, I was wondering when they'd notice the quantum physics sequence breaks. Time to show them why thinking outside the box isn't just fun, it's revolutionary. They'll never accept these modifications, Zixtal warned, his carapace shifting to warning patterns. The Confederation has protocols, standards, and a really predictable approach to problem solving, the human interrupted, already typing away at a console she'd modified to include what she called RGB gaming lights for better performance. Trust me, sometimes you need to break the game to make it better. Now, who's ready to show the Confederation how to speedrun bureaucracy? The alarms continued their epic gaming soundtrack as the humans settled in to teach yet another group of advanced aliens why sometimes the best solution was the one that made the least sense. But the most fun, the inspection. The Confederation battlecruiser loomed outside their viewport like an angry space whale having a bad hair day. Its traditional design, all sharp angles and intimidating weapon ports, stood in stark contrast to the now modified research vessel, which the human had somehow convinced to display a gentle RGB gradient across its hull for better aerodynamics in space. They're initiating docking procedures, Kurthi announced, her crystalline form cycling through worried frequencies. Chief Inspector Vax Lothan is aboard. He's known for his traditionalist views. Perfect. The human spun in her modified captain's chair, now with cup holders and gaming decals. Those are always the most fun to convert. Remember how you were 3 weeks ago, Sparkles? Please don't remind me. Kurthi's form flickered with embarrassment. And please don't call me Sparkles in front of the Chief Inspector. No promises. High Commander Zixtal chittered nervously. Perhaps we should try to explain our modifications through proper channels. Or, the human interrupted, pulling up a holographic display that definitely hadn't been certified by any regulatory body in the galaxy. We could show them instead. Trust me, seeing is believing. And I've got one hell of a demo prepared. The docking bay doors opened with their usual hiss, though now they also played a short victory jingle from something called Legend of Zelda. Out stepped Chief Inspector Vaxlothan, a towering figure whose species resembled what would happen if you crossed a praying mantis with a bureaucrat's filing cabinet. High Commander Zixtal. The inspector's voice crackled through his translator. Would you care to explain why your research vessel is broadcasting quantum signatures that violate 17 different safety protocols? And why our long-range scans show you've been bending reality in unauthorized ways? The human stepped forward before Zixtal could respond. Oh, that's nothing. Wait until you see what happens when we use the quantum core to run modded Skyrim. The inspector's compound eyes focused on her with laser intensity. A human? Here? And you're letting it touch sensitive equipment? It has a name, she replied cheerfully. But you can call me the admin. And as for touching equipment, she pulled out her modified device, which now sported even more unnecessary LED lighting. I haven't just been touching it. I've been improving it. Improving? Our technology is the culmination of millions of years of careful advancement. It cannot be improved by a species that still thinks launching exploding tubes into the sky is an appropriate way to celebrate. First off, fireworks are awesome. Second, she pressed a button on her device, and suddenly the entire ship shimmered. The inspector's personal shields flickered and died, his quantum communicator went silent, and even his translator hesitated before switching to what sounded suspiciously like UWU speak. What? What have you done? He demanded, his mandibles clicking in distress. Just demonstrated why sometimes thinking like a primitive can be an advantage, she grinned. Your technology is amazing, don't get me wrong. But you've all forgotten how to think outside the box. You're so focused on doing things the right way that you've missed all the fun exploits. Krathos stepped forward, her crystal structure glowing with newfound confidence. Sir, if I may, the humans' modifications have improved our engine efficiency by 3,000%, reduced power consumption to negligible levels, and somehow made our cafeteria food taste better. All by applying what she calls gamer logic to quantum mechanics. Impossible, the inspector declared, though his antenna twitched with uncertainty. Show me these improvements. The human's grin widened. Better idea. Let me show you what happens when you apply speedrunning strategies to administrative paperwork. She gestured, and a holographic display appeared, showing a complete analysis of the inspector's ship, including several rather embarrassing efficiency oversights that her primitive approach had identified in seconds. See, you've been filling out reports in sequential order, following all the proper channels, she explained, bringing up a dizzying array of documents. But if you sequence break the bureaucratic process... Her fingers flew over the controls, and suddenly hundreds of forms began auto-completing themselves at impossible speeds. You can complete 6 months of paperwork in about 3 minutes. The inspector's carapace had turned a fascinating shade of confused puce. That's not regulation. Neither is this, she replied, pressing another button. Every screen in the vicinity suddenly displayed scrolling lines of code that looked suspiciously like someone had crossed quantum physics with a game modding tutorial. I call it the Administrative Speedrun Protocol. It automatically identifies and exploits loopholes in bureaucratic systems while still technically following all regulatory requirements. Kind of like how speedrunners complete games without actually breaking any of the game's rules. They just use them in ways the developers never intended. Vaxlothan's compound eyes narrowed. And why should we trust these exploits? Because, she said, pulling up the ship's efficiency readings, in the 3 minutes we've been talking, I've already completed all the paperwork to approve our modifications, register them as official improvements under Confederation law, and submit a patent application that will revolutionize space travel across the galaxy. She paused, then added with a smirk. I also fixed that weird rattling sound your ship's quantum core was making. You're welcome. The inspector stood frozen, his bureaucratic mind struggling to process how someone had just sequence broke the entire regulatory system he'd spent centuries upholding. Face it, the human continued, casually sipping her Mountain Dew. Sometimes you need someone who thinks glitches are features and considers energy drinks a food group to show you new ways of solving old problems. The conversion Chief Inspector Vaxlothan's mandibles worked silently for several moments, like a computer trying to divide by zero. Finally, he managed to speak. You can't just optimize bureaucracy. Already did, the human replied, tossing her empty Mountain Dew can into a recycling bin that played the Mario coin sound effect. But if that's too much to process, want to see something really cool? She gestured at the nearby holographic terminal. I figured out how to run Doom on your quantum navigation system. Run Doom? The inspector's translator struggled with the concept. It's kind of a human tradition, she explained, as if running ancient video games on sophisticated alien technology was perfectly normal. If it has a computer in it, someone will eventually make it run Doom. I think my personal record is getting it to work on a sonic toothbrush. Krathos' crystalline form sparkled with what had become her version of a suppressed laugh. Over the past weeks, she'd learned that sometimes the best response to human innovation was simply to embrace the chaos. But the regulations, Vaxlothan protested weakly. Oh, those. The human pulled up another holographic display, this one showing a complex web of interconnected protocols and guidelines. See, here's the thing about regulations. They're like game rules. They tell you what you can't do, but everything else? Fair game. And you guys left some pretty interesting loopholes. She zoomed in on one particular section. Like right here. Regulation 47B subsection 12 states that all improvements must undergo proper testing and documentation, but it doesn't specify when the documentation needs to be filed relative to the testing. So technically, if you complete the paperwork faster than the speed of bureaucratic light, that's not how it's meant to work. The inspector's carapace had shifted through so many colors of distress, it was starting to resemble a malfunctioning RGB keyboard. Maybe not. High Commander Zixtal interjected, his own carapace showing surprising hints of amusement. But you can't deny the results. Our ship's efficiency ratings are unprecedented, and she did file all the proper documentation, just not in the expected order. Think of it like a reality speedrun, the human added helpfully. You know all those physics equations you use for FTL travel? Turns out they work way better if you treat them like game physics. Sure, you could carefully calculate every quantum probability. Or you could just figure out where the universe's collision detection gets a bit fuzzy and clip right through. The inspector's antennae drooped in resignation. The High Council will never accept this. About that, the human grinned, bringing up yet another display. Remember when I said I was completing paperwork? Well, I may have also submitted a proposal for a new division, the Department of Unconventional Physics and Reality Optimization, or DUPRO for short. You created a new government department in the time it took us to have this conversation? Even Krathos sounded impressed. Nah, that took like 30 seconds. The rest of the time was spent making sure the acronym spelled something fun. She paused, then added, Oh, and I also nominated our friend the inspector here to head it up. Congratulations on your promotion. Vaxlothan's compound eyes widened. You... what? Well, who better to oversee the integration of human gaming logic into Confederation systems than someone who knows all the regulations by heart? Plus, your efficiency ratings suggest you've been secretly optimizing your own paperwork for years. You're practically a bureaucracy speedrunner already, you just didn't know it. The inspector's carapace shifted to a thoughtful shade of blue. I may have found certain ways to expedite processes. See? You've got the spirit. Now you just need to learn how to properly exploit it. First lesson. Everything is better with RGB lighting. Second lesson. The laws of physics are more like physics guidelines. And third. She pulled out a fresh can of synthesized Mountain Dew and offered it to him. Sometimes you need to fuel your innovation with questionable energy drinks. To everyone's surprise, Vaxlothan actually took the can. After a moment of studying it with his compound eyes, he figured out how to open it and took a careful sip. His antenna shot straight up. This is not entirely unpleasant, he admitted, though I fail to see how it correlates with improved cognitive function. Oh, it doesn't, the human laughed. But it does make breaking reality way more fun. Now who's ready to learn how to sequence break quantum mechanics? I've got some great ideas about using wave function collapse like game-save states. And that was how the Confederation's most stringent inspector ended up becoming the first alien speedrunning enthusiast. Some say that to this day, new Confederation protocols arrive faster than technically possible, usually accompanied by unnecessary RGB effects and the distinct sound of energy drink cans being opened. As for the human, well, let's just say that DUPRO quickly became the Confederation's most interesting department, known for solving impossible problems with solutions that somehow worked better than they should. Their official motto? Reality is just a poorly optimized game engine waiting to be exploited. The only complaint came from the Confederation's accounting department, who couldn't understand why their annual budget suddenly included a massive allocation for something called gaming chairs and RGB quantum processors. But even they had to admit, the efficiency numbers were impressive. Just don't ask about the time someone tried to run Crisis on the galactic core. Some speedruns are better left unattempted. The revolution 6 months after the founding of Dupro, the Confederation was experiencing what could only be described as a cultural crisis, or as the human preferred to call it, a pro-gamer move. The High Council chamber, once a model of austere efficiency, now sported subtle RGB lighting that changed colors based on the current speaker's emotional state. The ancient quantum processors that managed galactic administration had been overclocked using techniques borrowed from gaming PC enthusiasts. And perhaps most shockingly, the traditionally stoic council members had developed an addiction to something the human called speedrunning strats. And so, council member Nix Varty concluded her presentation, her tentacles gesturing at the holographic display. By applying what our human consultant calls rocket-jumping physics to our standard transportation protocols, we can reduce intersystem travel time by approximately 87%. By exploding our way through space-time? Elder Mevthos asked, his crystalline form clouded with confusion. Technically, the human chimed in from her newly appointed position as Chief Reality Optimization Consultant, a title she'd speedrun through the bureaucracy in record time. We're just exploiting the fact that your ship's shield generators create a localized physics engine that can be tricked into treating explosion vectors as movement inputs. It's basically the same principle as using a grenade to launch yourself over a wall in a first-person shooter. I understood perhaps 3 of those words, Elder Mevthos admitted. That's okay, she grinned, taking a sip from her ever-present Mountain Dew. Your ships understand them, and that's what matters. Right, Vax? Chief Inspector, now Director. Vax Slothan's carapace shifted to what had become his excited about breaking physics color. In the months since his conversion to the ways of speedrunning, he'd become one of Dupro's most enthusiastic advocates. His office now featured not only the traditional certificates of authority, but also several speedrunning world record certificates for fastest processing of interstellar trade agreements and any % completion of first contact protocols. Indeed, he clicked happily. Our latest tests show that by treating reality like a poorly optimized game engine, we can achieve results that our traditional approaches never considered possible. For instance, we've discovered that quantum entanglement works 300% better if you just convince the particles they're in co-op mode. Kurthi, who had been promoted to head of alternative physics implementation, or as she preferred, Chief Glitch Hunter, added, "We've also found that by applying classic platforming techniques to gravitational fields, we can create stable wormholes using nothing but a clever manipulation of physics boundary conditions and what the human calls double jumping." The council chamber erupted in excited chittering, crystalline chiming, and various other species-specific sounds of approval. Only Elder Mevthos still looked concerned. But what of tradition, he asked. What of the careful, methodical approach that has served us for millennia? The human spun her gaming chair, now standard issue for all Dupro personnel, to face him. With all due respect, Elder, tradition is just a speedrun route that got popular. And like any good speedrunner knows, there's always a faster way. She's right, Vax Slothan added, his antennae twitching with newfound enthusiasm. Did you know that by applying what humans call frame-perfect inputs to our quantum computers, we've reduced calculation times to practically 0? We just had to convince the processors that they're trying to beat a high score. And don't forget the breakthroughs in medical science. Kurthi chimed in, her crystal structure glowing with excitement. By treating cellular regeneration like a game respawn mechanic, we've increased healing rates by 500%. The human nodded sagely. Turns out the universe runs on essentially the same code as any other complex system. And like any good game, it's full of exploits just waiting to be found. The trick is learning to think less like a scientist and more like a speedrunner looking for that perfect skip. Elder Mevthos's crystalline form shifted through several frequencies of uncertainty, before finally settling on a grudging acceptance. And I suppose this is why our latest quantum core upgrade involved installing something called RGB fans and gaming decals? The RGB makes it run faster, the human said with absolute conviction. It's just science. Well, game science, which, as we've proven, is sometimes better than regular science. Speaking of science, Vaxlothan interjected, pulling up a new holographic display. Wait until you see what happens when we applied portal physics to our waste management systems. Turns out the cake wasn't a lie, but conventional disposal methods were. As the council chamber filled with excited discussion about the possibilities of gaming-inspired innovation, the human sat back in her chair with a satisfied smile. In just 6 months, she'd transformed the most advanced civilization in the galaxy from rigid adherents of traditional physics to enthusiastic reality speedrunners. Not bad for someone who learned quantum mechanics by trying to mod Skyrim to run at 60 FPS on a potato. Of course, there were still those who resisted the changes. The Department of Conventional Physics regularly filed complaints about Dupro's flagrant disregard for how reality is supposed to work. But it was hard to argue with results, especially when those results involved faster-than-light travel achieved by what amounted to rocket jumping through space-time. As the meeting wound down, Elder Mevthos approached the human with what passed for curiosity among his kind. "Tell me," he asked, "what's next for Dupro?" She grinned, pulling out her modified device, now basically a quantum computer disguised as a gaming console. "Well, I've been thinking. You know how in games, you can often find hidden developer rooms by glitching through the right walls? I do not, actually. Right. Cultural reference fail. Let me put it this way. What if I told you I found some interesting collision detection errors in the fabric of reality? Areas where the universe's hit detection gets a bit fuzzy." The Elder's crystalline form pulsed with alarm. "You're not suggesting—" "Oh, I absolutely am. Who's up for trying to glitch our way into another dimension? I've already got the RGB quantum stabilizers ready to go." And somewhere, in whatever passed for reality's source code, the universe itself seemed to sigh and brace for another round of creative exploitation by its newest and most enthusiastic speedrunners. The speedrun to end all speedruns. "Okay, so here's the thing about reality," the human explained, standing before Dupro's newly assembled interdimensional speedrunning task force. The conference room, now equipped with enough RGB lighting to be visible from 3 star systems away, hummed with anticipation. "It's basically just running on a really complex physics engine, right?" Director Vaxlothan nodded, his carapace glowing with what the department had started calling his about-to-break-reality colors. "And like any engine, it has exploitable parameters." "Exactly." She pulled up a holographic display showing what appeared to be the universe's source code, or at least what it looked like when you treated existence itself like a hackable game. "See these quantum boundaries? They're basically just collision detection for reality. And what do gamers do with collision detection? Break it completely?" Kurthi offered, her crystalline form sparkling with amusement. "Now you're thinking with portals." The human grinned. "But seriously, look at this." She zoomed in on a particular section of the quantum matrix. "See how the universal constants sort of wobble a bit when you apply enough computational power? It's just like texture clipping in games. Push hard enough in the right spot, and you can glitch through the wall." Vaxlothan finished, his antennae twitching excitedly, or in this case, through the dimensional barrier itself. The assembled team, a mix of the Confederation's finest scientists and newly trained reality speedrunners, chittered and chimed with excitement. In the months since Dupro's formation, they'd grown accustomed to approaching the impossible with the casual confidence of someone trying to sequence break their way through a particularly challenging game level. "But surely," a new recruit asked, their gelatinous form wobbling nervously, "tampering with dimensional barriers could have catastrophic consequences?" "Oh, absolutely," the human agreed cheerfully, cracking open a fresh Mountain Dew. "But that's what save states are for, or as you guys call them, quantum state preservation matrices. Speaking of which," she turned to Kurthi, "how's our backup system looking?" Kurthi's form pulsed with pride. "We've modified the quantum core to create what you called checkpoint saves every microsecond. If anything goes wrong, we can reload from the last stable configuration." "Perfect. Nothing like a good save-scumming strategy when you're about to try something stupidly dangerous." The human clapped her hands together. "Now who's ready to try and clip through the walls of reality itself?" The lab they'd set up for the attempt looked like someone had crossed a quantum physics research facility with a professional gaming setup. Every piece of equipment sported unnecessary LED lighting. The main control console had been modified to accept input from what appeared to be various gaming controllers. And the walls were covered in posters showing optimal speedrunning routes through space-time. "Beginning quantum boundary scan," Kurthi announced, her crystal structure pulsing in sync with the equipment. "Looking for physics engine irregularities?" "Remember," the human added, fingers flying over a modified gaming keyboard that somehow interfaced perfectly with the alien technology. We're looking for any spot where the universal constants start to get a bit fuzzy, like when a game engine can't quite decide if you're supposed to be able to stand somewhere. Vax Lothan monitored the readings from his station, which now featured a gaming chair he'd become particularly fond of. I'm detecting some interesting fluctuations in Sector 7. The quantum probability matrices are showing patterns similar to what we see during our FTL rocket jumping. Good eye, the human exclaimed. That's exactly what we want. When reality starts getting confused about whether you're actually supposed to be able to do something, that's when the fun begins. She adjusted some settings, causing the quantum core to emit a sound suspiciously similar to the Mario power-up effect. Now let's see if we can... Suddenly, the air in the center of the lab began to shimmer. It wasn't the usual distortion they saw during normal quantum experiments. This looked more like when a game's graphics engine starts to break down. Are we seeing artifact clipping? Krathos asked excitedly. Even better, the human replied, her eyes gleaming. We're seeing reality fail its boundary checks. Quick, someone hit the quantum physics equivalent of the jump button while crouching. What happened next would have given any traditional physicist several simultaneous heart attacks. The fabric of space-time briefly displayed what could only be described as texture tearing, complete with the sort of visual glitches usually only seen in badly modded games. And through that tear they saw something. Is that another dimension? Vax Lothan asked, his carapace shifting through colors that didn't technically exist. Either that or we found reality's developer console, the human mused. Only one way to find out. Who's up for some interdimensional sequence breaking? Before anyone could answer, alarms started blaring throughout the facility. But instead of the standard warning klaxon, they played what sounded like boss music from various video games, a modification that had somehow spread through the entire Confederation emergency alert system. Uh-oh. Krathos' form flickered with concern. We're getting some unusual readings from the tear. It's almost like we've attracted attention from the other side. The human finished, grinning manically. Perfect. First contact via reality glitching. Now that's what I call a pro-gamer move. Through the dimensional tear, something began to emerge. Something that looked suspiciously like... Is that RGB lighting? Vax Lothan asked incredulously. Indeed, through the hole they'd torn, in reality shone the unmistakable glow of gaming aesthetics. And as the tear widened, they could make out what appeared to be some sort of advanced technological facility on the other side. One that looked remarkably similar to their own setup.